The second game that jumped off the page to me was the Arizona Cardinals hosting the Minnesota Vikings. You have Minnesota in a loss. You saw Thielen put up 2 touchdowns. Jefferson had a productive game, while Dalvin Cook didn't have his typical huge game. He wasn't a slouch. He put up some stats. So there's nothing to shy away from on that side. And then you don't really even have to get into the Cardinals. Everybody produced for them. I think Edmonds almost had 100 yards total. Obviously, Murray and Hopkins. Kirk had 2 touchdowns. So explain to me how in the comfy confines of that indoor stadium, depending on the weather or whatnot, how that's not going to be another one that people are all over.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, with all of these super high, like very attractive game environments, they're all the 4:00 Eastern games, which is
very rare.
Very rare. One, and just will create for very interesting like game theory, trying to figure out where to pick and choose, how much 1:00 do you play. But yeah, I mean, Arizona, let's give them props, right? I think Cliff Kingsbury is not very good at being a football coach, but Kyler Murray finally looks fully healthy, maybe for the first time in his NFL career, and boy, did he show it, right? Like, he was putting up top 3 fantasy quarterback numbers on, I don't remember what his injury was last year, but a bum something. And
well, it was he started out and they didn't limit his rushing at all.
Right.
And then around like week 8 or 9, something happened
it was that
where he
second
took a
half
little
of the
shoulder
season.
shot.
Yeah, shoulder.
And then they limited his rushing,
Right.
and then it all went down after
and
there.
and even then though, like he was my quarterback in my season-winning fantasy league. I traded for him at the deadline, and he was still good. Like, he was still putting up 20-point weeks. He had a floor, and I think what we're about to see from him in year 3, if he's able to stay fully healthy, is right up there with Mahomes' weekly type numbers. Josh Allen, Mahomes, Kyler, they were the big
correct.
3 in preseason, and it looks like there's no reason to think that that's not going to be the case. Yeah, I mean, Chase Edmonds really benefited from a very dynamic passing game, right? There was holes galore for him. I'm an Edmonds fan, within reason. I think he's one of those little kind of gadget type running backs that his upside could maybe be limited in depending on game script, but he's someone that you could be interested in this game. Hopkins, I probably steer away from Kirk this week. He's going to have, I'm sure people will be drawn to him after the 2 touchdowns. I think we know what Christian Kirk is at this point. He's like a solid third receiver. I don't think he's anything more than that. I'd more be interested in I'm fine with a Kyler Hopkins stack if you want to go that route, certainly. And then Rondale Moore, still at 4,000, still on the field for however many percent of snaps. Let me see if I can find it, but is going to be in that slot thing. And again, if you're especially looking for cash in a good game environment, he's got that 10-point floor for sure. So
yeah, and DraftKings did a favor for everyone. They actually removed AJ Green from the player pool because they want to just do you a favor. They don't want you to get enticed by seeing the name.
I think he's 3,700 though.
No, I know. That would be the ultimate. Imagine that DraftKings.
No.
I
know you were joking. I know you were joking, but I'm saying I think he's 3,700.
Yeah, I know, but I
also think he's.
I'm not joking. Do you imagine that? Like, how sometimes like, hey, you know what? You bet a team that got shut out will refund your money. Hey, you know what? We're gonna do you a favor. We're just gonna take AJ Green out of the player pool.
I do think he's washed though, for sure. And it's like he should be the 4th guy in targets on that team, maybe even 5th when Edmonds is on his game. So. But I don't know what it is, but these coaches love having him out on the field. Even last year, I mean, he played almost all 3 wide receiver sets for Cincy. So, there's something there. I guess just veteran presence and big outside target.
So it's funny when you look at these games, you see, for some strange reason, a lot of the high scoring games are pushed to 4, almost to the point where it seems odd. These are a lot of teams you don't see play at 4. And another one of these games, you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting, I believe they get back-to-back home games, hosting those fantastic Atlanta Falcons. So how are you feeling? Because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers actually have the highest implied total of the whole week.
So here's the thing, right? Falcons looked like maybe the worst team in football last week. The Bucs were in contention for the best. The Bucs are on long rest. It's in Tampa Bay. I tend to think that everyone is playable on this game, both sides. I'm scared off of Matt Ryan, but at least the skill positions on that side are playable because in all likelihood, the Falcons will be in the same game environment that the Lions were in last week, right? Where Jared Goff, Jamal Williams, and TJ Hawkinson were all heard from. I do think those receiving targets, at the very least, Calvin Ridley, I think, is in for a huge bounce back. I'm big on him this week. look, I get Dallas's offense is Dallas's offense. It's a top 5 offense, but they shred up that Tampa Bay secondary. It's the Tampa Bay front 7 that scares you. So if he has enough time to just get the ball out of his hands, which I don't necessarily trust because Atlanta does not have a good offensive line, but if he does have enough time to get the ball out of his hands, Pitts and Ridley, maybe Gage, should be heard
in the
from.
second half when a team has a big lead. Let's not act like the pass rushers have their ears pinned back going wild. They take plays off, big ones.
Absolutely. So, you look at what Amari Cooper did to them last week, 13 for 140 and 2. You look at what CeeDee Lamb, 7 for 104 and 1. They can be exploited through the air, and Atlanta is due to at least be better than last week. Now, the Tampa side is the interesting one for me because, I almost look at it in the week that I won last year. I looked at KC as, okay, if they're going to win by a lot, they're going to do it throwing. When does Tampa switch to a run? How big does their lead have to be? Can
I give a mini take on what I believe?
Give a full take.
Okay, you get a 75% take right here.
That's a good settle, a good compromise.
The one question you have to ask yourself if you want to build a stack or a double stack is this about Tom Brady winning another Super Bowl, or is this about Tom Brady like literally trying to break Peyton Manning's record in his last year or one of his last years and really cement every level of best ever?
Yeah.
Because if it's route A about we just want to get this team to be the best possible team, literally go 16-0 and stuff like that, then I believe he's going to do that thing where if somebody sags week 1, this was a Brady thing regardless, you saw this last year, if that running game sagged week 1, they will make sure that running game in an easy matchup gets fed and feels right after game 2, which brings me to what if you are going to stack, because still the running game could still go off and it looks like there's plenty of points to go around with an implied total of 32.5. Mike Evans, he's scoring a touchdown this week.
I agree.
There's no way on opening night Tom Brady doesn't know that the only one who gets zero praise is Mike Evans with his 3 targets, as Godwin has a productive game, Brown has a huge game, Gronk has a huge game. The only name not mentioned was Mike Evans. Usually, if you go back to last year and look, when Evans is sluggish one game, they force feed him the ball next game. And look, I can't guarantee it, but that seems to be what happens. They don't want, those are fiery receivers over there, and they always seem to be happy. It's because they know it's eventually coming for them. And I believe that if you're going to use Brady, I think the best thing you could do is get a discounted Mike Evans at 6,100. If you want to go that route. So that's my take on it is
we're on the exact same page. So I was going to, we'll talk about it when we make our lineups, but Evans is the guy I'm looking at this week. What Godwin had 9 for 105, Gronk had 8 for 90 and 2 touchdowns. Antonio Brown had 100 yards and a touch. Evans will be the guy that he at least aggressively force feeds targets to. We know Tom Brady does this. So now whether there's production out of that, we'll see. But he's only $100 more than Antonio Brown. He's only 400 less than Godwin. He's the guy I want there. I'm interested in all those guys. I think on the Atlanta side, I'm really probably, in a GPP build, I'll sprinkle in a Gage, very, very small. I'm not high on him right now. I want to see what he does. He had 2 targets. Yeah. I think that it's a run game. They're going to try to get Mike Davis and freaking Cordarrelle Patterson the ball. And then I think it's a 1A, 1B with Pitts and Ridley. So Pitts obviously did not fell short of what we were expecting to see him do last week, but they both had a 23% target share. And also, if you go back to last week, still, the Bucs also surrendered, 9 catches on 10 targets to Cowboys tight ends. It was just a mix of Jarwin and Schultz. Pitts is only 5,200. People are going to be off of him after he was the chalkiest tight end in history last week at 50, so in a much better game environment where they're going to be coming from behind, I'm definitely big on Kyle Pitts.
I'm going to invent a stat on you because usually when I notice something like this, it tends to be right, but I'm obviously too lazy to look up the exact metrics. But, someone out there will do it. No, they won't. But on the road, if you go look at the production of Matt Ryan's tight ends, he seems outdoors on the road to favor the tight ends. If you go look at Hayden Hurst's bigger games, they seem to be on the road, and it makes sense that if they go down, he'll be looking for some completions over the middle, and this could be a game where people are definitely off him with the price that it is. So if you are going to use a Brady stack, he could be a guy in a tournament to run the other way. That's what I would do.
The last thing I'll say, and I don't know if I'm doing this yet in this game. I really don't. I'm not sure if this is what I'm doing yet. But let me see, I got to see his price. But the same way Jared Goff ended up being perfect last week, which, by the way, fun little tidbit. Shout out to my brother-in-law for finding this one out. Also a huge DFS player. Jared Goff being in the perfect lineup last week was the first time, at least as far back as we've run data, which is like 3+ years, that the perfect lineup quarterback was not the highest scoring quarterback. Mahomes was highest scoring quarterback, and Jared Goff was the perfect quarterback. That almost never happens, and that is a product, in my opinion, of a huge slate, 12+ games, and week 1 pricing being coming out 6 weeks earlier. So that's going to result almost always. The perfect quarterback will be the highest scoring quarterback, which is why we've been saying now for a full year, it's cool to spend up on quarterback these days. But going back to my Matt Ryan point, I hate Matt Ryan. I'm not happy with how he looked at Arthur Smith offense. However, if his ownership percentage is going to be at like 3%, he's at 5,600 this week. He's cheaper than Jimmy Garoppolo and one of the highest over-unders on the slate. If they are going to be down by 3 scores, I think it's okay to sprinkle in 4 or 5% in your tournament builds. If you're a 150 player, if you're trying to play, GPPs, I think that's worth some Ridley, Pitts, single, doubles, whatever. It's worth a sprinkle because the field's going to be completely off it. You can run back with whatever fun Tampa guys you want, and it makes sense to, from a contrarian play, it probably makes sense to, you can't be too scared of results from week 1. I mean, I did not like how he looked at all, but it's probably worthy of doing that.
And then yet another 4:00 game that jumped off the page at me, and we just briefly mentioned it before, would be the Seahawks hosting the Titans. So you have Russell Wilson, who looked great on the road, throwing touchdowns, multiple touchdowns to Lockett and Metcalf, and you have 2 target monsters, which is always, in my opinion, ideal when you're trying to build stacks. And then on the other side, you're looking at Tennessee, who threw up an absolute dud and in their own building conceded multiple passing touchdowns. So one would have to assume you're going to see a lot of Russell Wilson Metcalf stacks.
Yep.
But I guess the real question is what percentage of Tennessee Titans are you going to see going against it?
Yeah, the Titans looked as bad as the Falcons, honestly, right? And it's weird because the Falcons took Arthur Smith, who was kind of that, what people say was kind of the secret sauce of that Tennessee potent offense that's been so good with Derrick Henry and Tannehill for now 2 or 3 straight years. I think Tannehill offers similar upside that Matt Ryan does as far as tournaments are concerned. He's 6,300. I think people will be off him after that week, and it's an appealing game environment. But I kind of want to take a wait and see approach on this Tennessee offense. They might just need a couple weeks to kick it into gear. Todd Downing is their new offensive coordinator. He's not the same as Arthur Smith. He is much more pass first. So we got to see how Derrick Henry really fits into this offense. Shout out to Silva's matchup column on ETR, but he's saying only an 11% play action rate for Tennessee last week, which was the lowest in the league last year. Meanwhile, Arthur Smith last year led the league in play action rate. So they knew how to get Henry involved and then use that to open up the pass game. I don't think this offense has figured that out yet. You throw in the Julio wrench. It's just a lot of new stuff going on here, and I want to see it really kick it to gear before I go heavy in on it.
When you're down by 2+ scores, you can try to play action all you want, but if you're on defense, you're going to say, let them do that all they want. They're throwing.
It's a great point, but they should have. They are a talented enough team that should have never even gotten to that point where they were down that big in that game. That game should have been much more competitive. It was, and it was a complete blowout. So we could talk about either that or Green Bay is the biggest surprise of the week last week. We knew Atlanta and the Giants weren't necessarily very good, but Tennessee and Green Bay just completely not showing up to those games were surprising. So Tennessee is tough. Again, you'll see me as far as a Derrick Henry guy. I'm not going to be recommending him until midseason. When we know that he really kicks into gear. We've spoken about that ad nauseum.
If the temperature is over 70, he's not in my lineup.
Right now, this is in Seattle. I don't know what the weather is going to call for this week, but I think that AJ Brown and Julio Jones are coming through this week. You have to put them in your build because people are going to be off that whole offense. We like the game environment. If you're going Russ, Metcalf, Lockett, if you're going any skinny stack with those guys, I really want one of those 2 big receivers coming back.
Quick non-mention name. See, this was a good little hint to me. Chris Carson. The fact that it just flew under the radar of this conversation, maybe.
Here's what I think of Chris Carson. I think he's a fine cash game running back. You'll be hard pressed to see me using him in tournaments very much. The ceilings are almost always limited, I like him for cash.
Which is weird that he's not dealing with much competition. Yeah,
but he catches very few balls, just the way that the offense flows, and he really needs like Derrick Henry type games to win GPP lineups. You know what I mean?
It's funny. I never used to think of him like that. And maybe the offense has shifted in a few years, but I remember in years prior he used to have receiving touchdowns, and maybe it's just different now that they have someone like Metcalf and
I mean,
It'll be
again,
more of a traditional
they're
offense.
working. The other thing there is they're working with the new offensive coordinator too, and Shane Waldron, who is notably much more pass first, which is we saw that last week, and I think we'll continue to see that. So I think Carson will be heard from this season. I'll probably be burned on him maybe 1 week in a GPP build, but I'll be fine with that because he's not going to end up in my GPP pools very often.